The first time it happened, I thought it was a mistake. I pulled into my street after a long, exhausting day at work, expecting the familiar sight of my empty driveway waiting for me like it always had. Instead, a shiny black SUV sat squarely across it, blocking the entrance completely. At first, I slowed down, confused. Maybe someone had pulled in for a minute. Maybe they were visiting a neighbor. Maybe they'd move as soon as they saw me waiting. But no one came out. The engine of my car idled quietly while I stared at the SUV. Its windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. No driver, no note, nothing. Just my driveway, completely blocked. I honked once, then again. Still nothing. A few neighbors peeked through their windows, curious about the sound. I could feel their eyes on the scene as I sat there, half annoyed and half baffled. Finally, I stepped out of my car and walked toward the SUV. Up close, it looked expensive. New, polished. The kind of car that clearly belonged to someone who didn't worry much about inconveniencing others. I knocked lightly on the hood, hoping someone nearby might hear. No response, so I walked up the sidewalk and knocked on the door of the house next door. The neighbor, Mrs. Reynolds, opened the door with her usual friendly smile. "Hi there," she said. "Everything all right? Do you know whose SUV that is?" I asked, pointing toward my driveway. She leaned slightly to look. "Oh, that's probably the new tenants across the street," she said casually. "They moved in yesterday." "Across the street," I repeated. "Yeah, I think they've got guests over already." "Guests? Great." I thanked her and walked back toward my car, hoping maybe the driver would appear any second. But 5 more minutes passed. Then 10. Cars started lining up behind me on the narrow street, unable to pass easily while I sat there waiting. My patience began to wear thin. Finally, a man in his 30s came strolling down the sidewalk, casually scrolling through his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. He walked straight toward the SUV. "Hey," I called out. He looked up briefly. "Yeah, you're blocking my driveway." He glanced at the car, then back at me with a shrug. "Oh, sorry about that," but his tone didn't sound sorry at all. He unlocked the SUV slowly, climbed in, and backed away like it was the most normal thing in the world. No apology, no urgency, just a careless wave before driving off. I stood there watching the empty street again, thinking maybe it really was just a one-time mistake. But I had no idea. That was only the beginning. And the next time they blocked my driveway, things would go very differently. The second time it happened, I knew it wasn't a mistake. It was a Saturday morning, the kind where the street is usually quiet and peaceful. I had plans to leave early for a grocery run before the weekend traffic got crazy. Coffee in hand, I stepped outside, and immediately froze. The same black SUV was sitting across my driveway again. Not just near it, not slightly overlapping it, directly blocking it, completely. For a moment, I just stood there staring at it like my brain was trying to process whether this was real or not. I walked closer, hoping maybe the driver was inside this time. Nope, empty. The same tinted windows, the same shiny paint, the same absolute disregard for the fact that someone actually lived here. I checked the houses across the street. The new tenant's place was buzzing with activity. People were laughing on the front lawn, music was playing, and it looked like they were hosting some kind of weekend gathering. So this time, I didn't wait. I walked straight across the street. A group of people stood near a grill in the yard, chatting loudly. When I approached, they barely noticed me at first. "Excuse me," I said. One guy turned toward me. Same guy from the other day. Phone in hand. Same casual attitude. "Oh hey," he said. "You're blocking my driveway again." He glanced over his shoulder toward the SUV like it had just appeared out of nowhere. "Oh right," he said casually. Then he laughed. "Yeah, we just parked there for a minute." I looked at him. "A minute? You've been blocking it for almost 20. He shrugged. "We'll move it." But no one moved. Instead, he went back to talking with his friends. They laughed. They continued their conversation. Someone handed him a drink. And I just stood there, waiting. A full 2 minutes passed. Then 5. Finally, I spoke again. "Are you going to move the car?" He looked at me like I'd just interrupted something very important. "Relax," he said. We said we'll move it. That word, relax, did something to my patience. I walked back across the street without another word and stood beside my car. 10 more minutes passed before the SUV driver finally wandered over and moved it. This time, there wasn't even a fake apology. Just another casual shrug, as if my driveway was some kind of public parking space. I watched the SUV drive away again, feeling something different this time. Not confusion, not annoyance, something sharper, because 2 times wasn't an accident. 2 times was a pattern. And patterns have a way of repeating themselves. Sure enough, later that same week, it happened again, but this time, I wasn't going to just stand there and wait. Because by then, I had already started thinking about a very specific lesson. A parking lesson they would never forget. The 3rd time they blocked my driveway, I didn't honk. I didn't walk across the street. I didn't even get out of my car right away. Instead, I just sat there for a moment with the engine running, staring at the now familiar black SUV parked sideways across the entrance like it owned the place. The evening sun was dropping behind the houses, casting long shadows across the street, and the music from the new tenant's house drifted through the air again. Another gathering, another crowd, another SUV parked exactly where it shouldn't be. Only this time, I felt oddly calm. Because during the past few days, something had shifted in my mind. The irritation had faded, replaced by a quiet kind of determination. I had already tried the polite route. I had walked across the street, explained the problem, waited patiently, and given them the benefit of the doubt. Twice. And both times, the response had been the same, a careless shrug and a delayed reaction. That told me everything I needed to know. They didn't respect the driveway. They didn't respect the inconvenience. And they definitely didn't expect any consequences. That was their mistake. I stepped out of my car slowly and looked at the SUV. A small parking permit sticker clung to the windshield, but otherwise the vehicle looked exactly as arrogant as before, polished, expensive, and parked like it owned the road. Behind me, another car turned onto the street and slowed, confused by the situation. The driver rolled down his window. "You stuck?" he asked. "Looks like it," I said with a small smile. He shook his head. "People these days." He drove off carefully, squeezing past the blocked driveway, leaving me alone with the SUV again. Across the street, laughter erupted from the house party. Someone turned the music louder. And that was when the idea clicked fully into place. I pulled out my phone and checked something quickly. Yes, perfect. You see, my driveway had something special most people didn't notice. It sloped downward slightly before leveling out near the garage. Normally, that didn't matter. But if a car stopped in just the right position across the entrance, gravity could make things interesting. Very interesting. I walked calmly toward the garage and opened it. Inside sat a few things most homeowners keep around: tools, storage bins, and a small portable car dolly I used occasionally when helping friends move vehicles. Harmless, legal, and incredibly useful. Across the street, the party continued without anyone paying attention to me. That worked in my favor. Because tonight, instead of arguing, waiting, or complaining, I was about to demonstrate something much more memorable. A practical lesson. A parking lesson. The kind that tends to stick with people long after the moment passes. I rolled the dolly quietly toward the driveway entrance and glanced once more at the SUV. Still there. Still blocking. Still completely unaware of what was about to happen. And in that moment, I couldn't help but smile slightly. Because by the time the driver came back outside, their car was going to be somewhere very different. And the lesson was only just beginning. The street was still full of noise and laughter when I wheeled the car dolly to the edge of my driveway. Across the road, the party continued like nothing in the world mattered. Music thumped softly through open windows, people chatted on the lawn, and the same careless energy floated through the air. No one was paying attention to me. Perfect. I crouched beside the SUV and looked around one more time. The streetlights were beginning to flicker on as the sky darkened into evening. A few passing cars rolled slowly by, but none of the drivers gave me more than a curious glance. To them, I probably looked like someone working on their own car. Which, technically, wasn't far from the truth. I slid the small-wheeled dolly carefully under the front tire of the SUV. The tool was simple but powerful, designed to lift a tire slightly off the ground so the vehicle could be rolled in any direction. It took a little effort, but after a moment, the tire lifted just enough. Then I repeated the process on the other side. Within minutes, the heavy SUV was balanced on the dollies, no longer gripping the pavement with its weight. Now came the fun part. I placed both hands against the side of the vehicle and pushed. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly, almost magically, the SUV began to move. Just an inch, then another. The dollies rolled smoothly beneath the tires as the vehicle shifted sideways across the driveway entrance. I kept pushing. The slight downward slope of my driveway did the rest. The SUV rolled slowly, almost silently, down the slope until it stopped perfectly in the middle of my driveway. Completely inside it, not blocking it anymore, occupying it, I stepped back and admired the result. The vehicle that had blocked my driveway 3 separate times was now parked squarely inside it, with no easy way to drive out. And the best part, the dollies were still under the tires, meaning the driver wouldn't immediately realize why the SUV wasn't moving normally. Across the street, the party still continued. Someone started clapping to the beat of the music. Someone else laughed loudly, but none of them had noticed the small relocation project that had just happened 20 feet away. I rolled the dolly tools quietly back into my garage and closed the door. Then I parked my own car behind the SUV, completely blocking it in. For the first time all week, my driveway was technically free from obstruction. Ironically, the only car stuck there now was theirs. I leaned against the garage door for a moment, sipping the last of my now cold coffee. The streetlights hummed softly above, and across the road, the party finally began to wind down. One by one, people started leaving the house. Engines started, car doors slammed. Eventually, the familiar guy from earlier stepped out of the house again, phone in hand. He walked casually down the sidewalk toward where he thought his SUV was parked. But when he reached the spot and realized it wasn't there, he froze. Then he slowly turned his head toward my driveway, and the look on his face was priceless. For a few seconds, the guy just stood there. He looked at the empty curb where his SUV had been parked, then slowly turned his head toward my driveway. His eyes locked onto the vehicle sitting perfectly in the center of it. Then he looked at me. I was still leaning casually against my garage, arms folded, watching the realization slowly unfold across his face. At first, he seemed confused, then suspicious, then irritated. He walked across the street quickly. "What the hell is my car doing in your driveway?" he demanded. I shrugged lightly. "Well," I said calmly, "it's not blocking my driveway anymore." He stared at me like he couldn't decide whether I was joking or insane. "You moved my car." "I relocated it," I corrected. "You can't touch someone else's car." I raised an eyebrow. "And you can't block someone else's driveway." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Behind him, 2 of his friends wandered over, curious about the confrontation. "What's going on?" one of them asked. "This guy moved my SUV." The driver snapped. They looked at the vehicle sitting inside my driveway, then back at me. One of them actually chuckled. "Well, you were blocking his driveway earlier." The driver ignored him and marched toward the SUV. He grabbed the door handle, climbed inside, and slammed the door shut. The engine started. The headlights flicked on. Then he shifted the gear into reverse. The SUV jerked slightly, but it didn't move. He tried again. The engine revved louder this time. Still nothing. Inside the vehicle, his confusion quickly turned into frustration. He opened the door and stepped out again. "Why isn't it moving?" I tried not to smile. "Well," I said thoughtfully, "that's the tricky part." He crouched beside one of the tires and finally noticed the small metal dolly underneath it. "What is this?" "That," I explained calmly, "is why the SUV won't move normally." His friends leaned closer to look. "You put those under my tires." "Yep, so take them off." I shook my head slowly. "Not tonight." His jaw tightened. "You're joking." "No," I said, "I'm teaching a parking lesson." He looked furious now. "You can't keep my car here." "Actually," I replied, "it's parked on my private property now." His friends were trying very hard not to laugh. "You blocked my driveway 3 times this week," I continued calmly. Tonight I figured we'd try something different. The driver rubbed his temples like he couldn't believe this was happening. So when do I get my car back? I checked my watch. Well, tomorrow morning should work. His eyes widened. You're serious? Completely. Behind him, one of his friends finally burst out laughing. And that was when the driver realized something important. The entire street was watching now. And suddenly, he wasn't the one in control anymore. The laughter from his friend spread faster than he expected. Within seconds, a few more people from the house across the street wandered over, curious about the situation. Someone whispered something, another person chuckled, and suddenly the quiet neighborhood street had become a small audience. The SUV driver didn't like that one bit. "All right, this is ridiculous," he said, raising his voice. "Move those things so I can leave." I stayed where I was, calm and unmoved. "You had no problem leaving your car blocking my driveway 3 times, I replied. "Tonight you get to experience the other side of the inconvenience." His frustration grew quickly. "You can't hold someone's car hostage." "I'm not," I said. "Your car is parked safely. On my property. Not damaged. Not towed. Just temporarily relocated." One of his friends leaned toward him and whispered, "Honestly, man, you kind of asked for it." The driver shot him an annoyed look. Across the street, Mrs. Reynolds had stepped onto her porch again, watching everything with clear interest. She wasn't even pretending to hide it this time. More neighbors began appearing at windows and doorways. The quiet street had suddenly become tonight's entertainment. The driver rubbed the back of his neck. "Fine," he said. "Just tell me how to fix it." I walked a few steps toward the SUV and crouched near one of the wheels. "These are car dollies," I explained. "They lift the tires so the car can roll sideways." His friend nodded. "Oh yeah, mechanics use those." "Exactly," I said. The driver folded his arms impatiently. "So take them off." I stood up again. "Tomorrow morning." His eyes widened again. "You're serious about that?" "Very." "Why?" I looked directly at him. "Because next time you think about blocking someone's driveway, I want you to remember tonight." The street went quiet for a moment. Even the people watching from their yards seemed to appreciate the point. The driver sighed heavily. "Man, I just needed a place to park." "There's street parking everywhere," I replied. He glanced around the block and realized I was right. Several open spots sat along the curb just a short distance away. "But my driveway," I continued. "That's not one of them." One of his friends chuckled again. "Honestly, dude, lesson learned." The driver exhaled slowly, clearly realizing the argument wasn't going anywhere. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "All right, tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow morning," I confirmed. The tension in the air eased slightly. People began drifting back toward the house party and their homes. But as the driver walked away, he turned once more and looked at the SUV sitting helplessly in my driveway. Then he shook his head and muttered something under his breath. Because deep down, he knew something now. The driveway he had treated like a casual parking spot had just become the most inconvenient place his car had ever been. And the lesson still wasn't over yet. The next morning arrived faster than anyone expected. By 8 o'clock, sunlight had already filled the street, and the quiet suburban block looked almost completely normal again. Birds chirped from the trees, a couple of neighbors walked their dogs, and the world carried on like nothing unusual had happened the night before. Except for one thing. The black SUV was still sitting squarely in the middle of my driveway. And the driver was standing beside it. I stepped outside with a cup of coffee just as he noticed me coming out of the house. His arms were folded, and he looked like he hadn't slept much. "Morning," I said casually. He sighed. "Morning." For a moment, neither of us said anything. The tension from last night had cooled a bit, replaced by something more awkward than angry. "So," he said finally, gesturing toward the SUV, "are we finishing this parking lesson?" I smiled slightly. "Yeah, I think you've had enough time to reflect." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, about the driveway thing." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, I shouldn't have blocked it," he admitted. "Honestly, I didn't think it was a big deal." I took a sip of coffee. "For you, it wasn't. For me, it meant I couldn't get in or out of my own house." He nodded slowly. "Fair point." Across the street, Mrs. Reynolds appeared again on her porch with her morning tea, clearly interested in how the situation would end. A couple of other neighbors slowed down while walking past, pretending not to watch. The driver looked around and then back at me. So, lesson learned. Good, I said. Then I walked over to the SUV and crouched beside the tires. One by one, I removed the dollies from underneath the wheels. Without them lifting the tires, the SUV settled firmly back onto the pavement. The driver watched closely. "All right," I said, standing up. "You're free to go." He climbed into the vehicle and started the engine. This time when he shifted into reverse, the SUV rolled back smoothly. He stopped for a moment at the edge of the driveway and rolled down his window. "You know," he said, half laughing now, "that was actually kind of brilliant." I shrugged. Sometimes people remember lessons better when they experience them. He nodded. "Trust me, I'll never park there again." Behind him, Mrs. Reynolds gave me a small approving wave from across the street. The driver pulled away from the curb and parked farther down the block where an open space had been available the entire time. And just like that, the driveway problem was finally over. But the story of the driveway parking lesson wasn't quite finished yet. Because by that evening, the entire neighborhood would be talking about it. And the lesson would spread further than I ever expected. By the evening, the story had already spread across the entire block. It started the way most neighborhood stories do, quietly, between two people talking on a porch. Mrs. Reynolds told the couple next door what she had seen the night before. They told someone else during their afternoon walk. By sunset, nearly everyone on the street had heard some version of the driveway incident. And somehow, each version sounded a little more dramatic than the last. When I stepped outside that evening to take out the trash, my neighbor Tom from 2 houses down waved me over. "Hey," he said with a grin. "So you're the guy with the famous driveway now." I laughed. "Famous? Oh yeah," he replied. "Word travels fast around here." He leaned against his fence. "I heard you trapped someone's SUV overnight." "Well," I said, "technically I just parked but more accurately." Tom chuckled. "Honestly, I wish I'd thought of that years ago." "Why?" "You'd be surprised how many people treat other driveways like public parking." That comment made a few things click in my mind. Apparently, my situation wasn't unique. Just then, another neighbor, Linda, walked past and joined the conversation. "I saw the whole thing from my window last night," she said. "The look on that guy's face when he realized his car was in your driveway was priceless." Tom laughed again. "Oh, I bet," Linda continued, "but honestly, it was kind of perfect. No yelling, no fighting, just a lesson." "That was the goal," I said. Across the street, the new tenant's house was quiet now. The party from the night before was gone, and the street had returned to its normal peaceful rhythm. Then, something unexpected happened. The SUV driver stepped out of his house again. For a moment, I wondered if round 2 was about to start. Instead, he walked straight toward me. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He glanced at Tom and Linda and gave a small nod before turning back to me. "I just wanted to say, you were right." That caught me off guard. "About what?" "The driveway thing," he said. "I talked to the others in the house today. We didn't realize how annoying that must have been." Tom and Linda exchanged amused looks but stayed quiet. The driver continued, "So we made a rule. No parking anywhere near your driveway again." I smiled. "That's all I wanted." He nodded once. "Fair enough." Then he walked back toward his house. Tom let out a low whistle. "Well," he said, "that's one way to solve a neighborhood problem." Linda nodded. "And without calling the police or starting a fight." I looked down the street at my now completely empty driveway. For the first time all week, it felt like everything was exactly how it should be. But what none of us realized yet was that the story of the driveway lesson was about to travel much farther than just our street. The driveway stayed clear for the rest of the week. Every morning when I stepped outside, the space in front of my house was exactly as it should be, open, quiet, and completely unobstructed. No SUV, no careless parking, no awkward confrontations, just my driveway. For a few days, life returned to normal. But the story didn't disappear. In fact, it started traveling far beyond our street. One evening, I came home from work and noticed Tom waving at me from his driveway again. This time he looked amused. "You're famous," he said. "Again with that." I laughed. "No, seriously," he replied, holding up his phone. He showed me a neighborhood community group online. Someone had posted a short story about the driveway parking lesson that had happened on our block. Apparently, Mrs. Reynolds had told her sister. Her sister had told someone in another neighborhood. And somehow the story ended up posted online. I read the post and couldn't help smiling. According to the internet version, I had brilliantly trapped a driveway thief using nothing but physics and patience. "That's a little dramatic," I said. Tom shrugged. "People love a good story." The funny part was the comments. Hundreds of people were talking about their own driveway problems. Neighbors blocking entrances, delivery drivers parking carelessly, strangers treating private driveways like public parking. Some people were even joking about trying the same trick. "Look at this one," Tom said, scrolling. One comment read, "Best parking lesson ever. I wish I had thought of that years ago." Another said, "No yelling, no fighting, just a clever solution." I handed the phone back. "Well," I said, "hopefully people remember the lesson." "Which is?" Tom asked. I glanced down the street at my now perfectly clear driveway. Respect other people's space. Later that evening, as the sun set behind the houses, the SUV driver walked past again on his way to the mailbox. He gave me a quick nod. I nodded back. No tension, no hard feelings, just a quiet understanding, and the driveway stayed clear. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. Not once did another car block my driveway again. Sometimes the best solutions aren't loud arguments or angry confrontations. Sometimes all it takes is a small, clever lesson delivered at exactly the right moment. Because once someone experiences the inconvenience themselves, they never forget it. And apparently, neither does the internet.
The driveway caused so much frustration ended up teaching more than just one neighbor a lesson. I reminded everyone on the block and far beyond it that respect simple. You just have to park in the right place. If you enjoyed the don't forget to subscribe to Karen Universe, share with your friends and drop your thoughts in the comments.